So welcome to Africa's random conversation on governance, politics, economics, business, as well as many other issues happening across the continent. On this particular show, I'm joined by Joshua Kagoma Motoka, who is a governance expert and a lawyer practicing here in Uganda, Kampala, East Africa. Joshua, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Derek, for inviting me to the Africa Random Conversation, and I look forward to the random discussion we shall have definitely on many aspects that are happening across, that are affecting both local, regional and international events within the different parts of the world, but also specifically on Africa. And it's quite an interesting one, and I would love to know, Derek, what has made news for you starting this week probably, or through the month, what has been on top?
Perfect. So as for me, I think the sad news we received on Thursday, where Kenya actually lost its Chief of Defense Forces, General Francis Ogola, I think hits home hard, given that Kenya is on several fronts in respect of stabilizing the region, the East African region, and Somalia. They're in Somalia. The Kenya Defense Forces are in Somalia under the AMISOM, but also internally they are fighting banditries in the West Pokot areas, where actually the CDF had gone to inspect. So I think for me that is what is more outstanding or sounding this week. But the month also, I would say it's a special month here in Africa, but mostly in Rwanda, where they were celebrating 30 years of Kwibuka, which is the anniversary of the 1994 genocide. So I think, Joshua, for me, those are the two events that for me have captured my attention. I think we shall discuss them deeply later.
Definitely, yes. It is an interesting one because talking of the death of a CDF, today when you look at the events in Kenya about the death of the CDF, it's not just about the death of the CDF, but about his appointment as a CDF. That is why there is a lot of question about and then how he died. Definitely Africa is quite an interesting I would say arena where such death, definitely their investigations are sometimes not fully revealed and you can never come to the conclusion of exactly what happened. To Rwanda, it gives a great picture as they celebrate 30 years.
Yes.
Kwibuka. The conflict in DRC definitely also is part of that discussion because it's ongoing. So that is quite interesting. For me, I would say the most significant was the Senegal election.
Yes.
That really spoke to many young people across the continent. But especially for a young man to come 10 days to election and win them. I think that was very significant. And I also, the recent visit by Ramaphosa to Uganda and South Sudan, should be something to look into and try to appreciate what is happening on the continent.
Good. But also South Africa will be going for elections, a very interesting one.
Yeah, sure. South Africa will indeed be going to elections, and what has been most significant about this election is actually that you see former President Zuma coming back to the ballot, and in as much as the election management body has tried to frustrate, to stop him from appearing on that ballot paper, they went to court and won. But for me, it is the party under which is coming, which is Nkosi. It's I forget the exact name, but it's quite interesting because this is the party, the name that was used during the ANC struggle as a military wing. So this
Mkoto Swize.
So that speaks to exactly what is bringing on board the dynamics, but also specifically his area where he is trying to capture all this has been a very stronghold of ANC. So these dynamics are going to play out into the elections.
Does that mean that the ANC will lose some seats? The economic freedom fighters of the Julius Malema are likely to have an upper hand?
I foresee from the analysis of several probably experts and I've been saying that this could be there where ANC loses most of the seats, which I also suspect. then I suspect that AN's Economic Freedom Fighters might also lose some seats because of the new party of former president now coming on board. I foresee that they might also lose, because some people might just choose to say we are lying to this, and they believe in that, and they could choose if they get to the ballot. So I suspect, even if EFF has been able and largely active on ground as one of the strong opposition parties, I suspect that they might lose some seats equally. But all this, even when they lose, I think ANC will still lose. So if EFF loses seats, does not mean that the big opposition party has lost. It could mean that the new party has also gained a certain number of seats. So that's what I see.
So chances are Ramaphosa will be back in power.
I see that he will be back in power.
Internally, there have been dynamics at the African National Congress.
So much.
Yes.
The party is divided, one because of corruption internally, and also the mismanagement of resources. The beauty with South Africa is that there is a lot of institutional independence in most of these in holding leaders accountable. So that
but there are those who are saying that Ramaphosa's reign has used it against his compatriots in ANC. There are those who feel that the state capture investigation actually was targeting Jacob Zuma, who is back into the mix of things.
Definitely, for any politician or president, what would one definitely come out and say? That could be true. I don't want to speak from a place that I've read the reports, but from the actual analysis that you see, it is a concern that the institutions have not done that much compared to the previous one, because there has been a bigger call. The question I think we should also ask ourselves, how come when there was a call for the two former presidents, that is both that is Jacob Zuma and also both of them resigned. So you see that they took personal responsibility over accountability issues and resigned, yet the current one has stood his ground and is not willing to step aside. So it also comes back to the individual leaders in charge. At what extent are they willing to say, I'm responsible and I'll step aside, let the party win? So the party has been so much divided. ANC itself internally, it is fractured.
That's true.
That is why it is playing to the advantage of who? Former President Zuma now.
Zuma, okay. I get it. Now, but still talking about the South African politics, but also their president, Cyril Ramaphosa. Like you highlighted, Ramaphosa was in the region, in the East African region. First, he met President Museveni. I think he was here for a few hours, and then he moved to South Sudan. In South Sudan, he met quite a number of the political leadership there, from all the vice presidents. South Sudan has 5 vice presidents. I think this arises out of the revitalized peace agreement.
Definitely.
So what I'm not sure is whether South Africa is a guarantor to that peace agreement, but it is in the mix of things. He had an opportunity to meet the Speaker of the Parliament, of the Assembly, of the National Assembly. He met Dr. Riek Machar, who is a vice president as well. Dr. Riek Machar, as we all know, was exiled for so many months in South Africa, but is back home now. They seem to say, some sections in South Sudan seem to suggest that they're actually ready for the election next year. I don't know what you think.
I don't want to believe that South Sudan is really ready for the elections.
Yes.
In as much as an election definitely gives an opportunity, you can never be certain that even countries that has what I would consider a country like US that has held election for a long period of time, that you can look at and think that they are much more prepared. You remember in the last elections when there was quite interesting events that played out, and there was issues of hacking into electoral system. So the preparation of an electoral process of an election is beyond just an election itself.
Yes.
It's the institutions, it is the transparency of these institutions and all this.
Yes.
But back to Ramaphosa's visit to both Uganda and
but do you think the possibility of a free and fair election, the way Sudan is structured currently and the challenges it is facing, do you think they could pull out a free and fair election?
I don't think they can pull that out. One,
and I think this is the first election since
definitely
since the election they had this will be the first election as an independent
Definitely.
state.
Being the first election, it means and speaks a lot into where they head. But also the process that has been going on, trying to build this peace along the way, bringing all these conflicting parties together, has been one way of trying to tell themselves and probably the region at large that look here, the cost of the war has been much more big on them as a nation.
Yes.
And if they can sit on one table, yes, the comprehensive agreement that brought them together, and you have 5 vice presidents, is quite dynamic. It's a unique one. Nowhere, I think, in the world we have had 5 vice presidents in one nation.
That's
but
true.
It was just to cater for the interests and bring these parties together. So to put them on one table in an electoral process, it is well known that an election is always across the world is a contestation for power. Now, what to talk about South Sudan, the question is, who are those likely candidates into the race? If you want to understand how it will play out, then you have to understand who are the likely candidates. I don't know who are the likely candidates.
I think the likely candidate, I would imagine the Dr. Riek Machar is interested.
Yes.
But also the SPLM historicals would want to have Salva Kiir on the ballot paper.
Definitely,
So-
Salva Kiir will be back
Yes.
on the ballot paper.
Yes.
Riek will be back. Does that then mean if anyone loses an election, for example, if say Machar loses an election, is he willing to stand and abide by the rules of the game?
Yes.
Not the game in terms of, say, it is politics at the end of the day.
Yes.
That we went through a process, we should respect the results that are announced.
Yeah.
I don't want to believe so. But
But also there's something else in the mix. You know, these are Dr. Riek Machar, Salva Kiir, both had their separate fighting groups.
Yes.
But also still in their own fighting groups, there are some who have disagreed with the fact that Dr. Riek Machar is now in government. So it means that how grounded is the state infrastructure to pull off this election, and some people lose and walk away, and the state is still intact. The state of South Sudan is still intact. Now, you factor that in the other side of the north, there is a conflict, a civil war actually.
Yes.
And there are reports that the state, South Sudan, the Upper Sudan could actually be going into experiencing a famine. Yes, Joshua.
Yes, definitely. As I told you, that an election deals with, you're dealing with institutions here, and the institutions you're also talking about. An election, securing an electoral process requires security itself, not just for the system of elections, but as a nation, because
Election security.
Yes, election security becomes quite important. The uniqueness about South Sudan is that there has not been a fully integration of the different factions that we fought the previous probably wars, but also coming to the current conflict, conflict that led to this current arrangement of having 5 vice presidents. They have not been fully integrated in the system to have, say, one army.
Yes.
So
that's was one of the terms in the revitalized agreement.
yes, now
Demobilizing other fighting groups to join
absolutely
the army.
that leaves a very big gap in terms of how the elections end, and in terms of the transparency of the system as to whether they can look at the process and tell themselves, we need to build a nation through an electoral process, through a democratic process, and not through war. Now, it's a choice they will have to make. If they choose to think that they will build a nation, South Sudan, through war, then others will continue to hold their guns by that way. But if they believe that an election and the governance process that is available for them is the best option to build the nation, then it is going to be the way they will take it and accept whatever results come out. For me, I think that's what is going to be very significant in this process at the end of the day.
Nice. Now, South Sudan would say is one of the youngest countries, not only just in Africa, but in the world. But I'll stick to the African context in which we are discussing these issues. But also South Sudan happens to be in the East African community.
Absolutely.
And their president is actually the chairman of the community right now, which is a rotating position among member states. Now, the other aspect is that it's part of the African Union. What role do these two integration, let me call them association or clubs of bigger countries, the African Union, as well as the East African community, but also factor in that there's still a UN keeping force on the ground in Sudan. And the UN, what role do they play as stakeholders in ensuring that South Sudan can actually transition into a much more peaceful dispensation that is a very vibrant democracy by, first of all, having a free and fair election? What role do these three critical institutions play? Do you see them?
Yeah,
do you see them influencing things in one or another?
Yes, I am certain that UN has a system, and I think they are supporting the process of the process leading to elections as we speak now, trying to build institutional capacity in a certain way. They are contributing to that, and by doing that, they are trying to empower the people responsible, the institutions
Civil
responsible,
society
civil society as well, to ensure that it's not just a process that will end, but it's also, it can be held accountable for whatever results that come through in that way. So I think that is a contribution, but the bigger picture is always about the nation itself. I think, and those in charge of the nation, regardless of where they are, where do they want their nation to go? Are they willing themselves to put themselves at a table being held accountable? And that is, for me, the biggest thing. UN will only do their bit. They will not have the mandate to organize those elections. They are only trying to give you a platform, empower you, and ensure that there is a peaceful process. Like I said, the choice is going to be in how all the parties, stakeholders in this process, perceive nation building. Those who think nation building is going to come through the barrel of the gun, they will go by that. Those who think that it is time for us to lay down the guns and build this nation through a democratic process, we will indeed look at that. Now, if the space is going to be provided for everyone, that's when you will see that everyone will appreciate that the democratic process is the only way for us to build this nation and grow it. That is what I think for me is quite significant in there.
So we wish South Sudan very well. I was there in October, and I can tell you, it's a very beautiful country, good people.
Beautiful,
of course, a little hot.
Now what do you mean?
Nature, it's a very blessed country. You know, any country near the Nile is definitely blessed. Beautiful people, as well as very hospitable. But the challenge I think they were facing also is, and still going on, I think, is the economics of the day. South Sudan has been battered by inflation, a lot of inflation, but also it's a very mineral-rich country. It has oil.
And definitely.
Yes, it has oil, and we are hopeful that that when the country stabilizes, there will be more much as far as the economics of the country is concerned.
Yes, you talk about the economics. How is the Sudan war playing into the economy? Because certainly reports are that there are more refugees flowing from the north to the south. How is that playing out with a country that is seemingly also struggling with its governance systems and then trying to contain all this pressure of the refugees that are coming in?
Yes.
How is that playing out?
Yeah, just like any other neighboring country, it's really strained because it has its own internal challenges as far as the economics of the day is concerned, high rates of inflation, and then when you bring in refugees coming in from the other part of the country, still there is also a possibility of some pockets of insecurity, of some rebel groups coming into the side and then joining groups here to destabilize the country. So it's a very delicate situation, and we hope that things in the other upper part of Sudan can only get better so that we have peace in that part of the region. Then let's move on, Joshua. The other thing, like we said, for me, was the Kwibuka event in Rwanda.
Sure.
There's a lot of talk has been going on between Rwanda, between Kigali and Kinshasa. You were in Congo, I think, last year. You were in,
I was in Goma.
That was before the election?
Yeah, before the election.
Before the election, yes. Tshisekedi got his second term, but he was promising that he would attack Kigali. But I don't think he's going to do that, because I don't think the region would want to have such another war or breakout, because already Congo still has its own internal issues. Now I'll briefly talk about the Kwibuka. So 30 years ago, we all know that horrific events happened in Rwanda. A genocide and massive killing of people of one ethnicity, that is the Tutsi, were actually happened over a period of 100 days. So this year marks 30 years since that event. And this year we saw so many dignitaries go to Kigali to celebrate or to commemorate or in remembrance with them. Among them, it was, I think, people like Bill Clinton, the former United States leader, and other leaders from within the continent and across the world. But still, you could hear the voices coming in from Rwanda, which they were until now still into a mourning season up to the end of this month. Probably that the world has not done much. And also Kagame's message was very, very, in my view, very instructive on not only just Rwanda, but also the African continent or the African race, that no one was going to come to save you. You know, no one is going to save you. So let's work for peace, let's work for justice across our communities, regardless of which country you're from, because no one is going to save you. What is your take on 30 years?
It's definitely interesting that 30 years, after 30 years, we say never again.
Never again.
And indeed, it should be never again. Now, the debate on 30 years is a reflection of the conflict in DRC Congo.
Yes.
Where you've had, say, Rwanda being indicted by a UN report and all this about its support for M23. But on the other hand, Rwanda is also saying, look, they are the FLDR, I think, is being, it's working together with armed groups that have been responsible, that are held responsible back in Rwanda for the genocide, are willing to come back and destabilize the peace of a nation, Rwanda. And for anyone to appreciate is that for any nation, their security is paramount. So Rwanda stands up and will tell you that we will defend the nation, the security of our nation at all costs. And that is what they will tell you that this is what we stand for. The biggest question, I think, partly is also to address the issue of M23 here. That who is M23? What are they standing for? Are they Congolese or they are not Congolese? You get it? Are they citizens? Now, it's a very, very large question that you open up a big Pandora box, going as far as back as their independence and all the leaders that have come into, that have played to the tribal politics within Congo. The question of governance in Congo also becomes quite important. That then why don't you accommodate this? Tshisekedi's election, definitely him coming out vividly speaking about we are willing to confront Rwanda. It's also something that makes Rwanda on the other side to tell itself, okay, let's also prepare in case of an attack.
But it seems the tone has changed.
But the tone has changed. This I state from a place that,
and which is a good thing.
Very good for the region.
For purposes of de-escalating tension.
I'm certain that there has been a backdoor channel push for
some subtle kind of diplomacy behind the scenes.
It's been going on even at the peak of that tone by Tshisekedi. There's backdoor diplomacy that was pushing for mediation in all this, and definitely Angola has played a big role into this. If you know very well that they're the ones trying to accommodate to host that kind of mediation. So they're trying to push for this. The push is from the different actors. That is EU. You have also the region that has tried to push. Though the region has its own challenges, as an East African community, we have had our own challenges. So
solutions are being thought outside the East African.
Outside. That's why you have,
let me call it so.
Definitely, that's why you have institutions now like SADC coming in as a force to try and stabilize the situation. That returns us to the question of why Ramaphosa comes to Uganda, because the conflict in DRC is affecting them, and then they're understanding that, okay, partly Uganda is also very significant, has a significant role to play in the region, in the Great Lakes region, in terms of security. So it feels for me back to the issue of 30 years ago when the genocide happened. We are back at the table and we are asking ourselves, one, has Rwanda progressed as a nation?
Yes, it has.
That
tremendously.
It has indeed progressed.
And I can give witness to that. I happened to travel there in May last year. They were hosting the biggest basketball event on the continent. That's BAL, Basketball League Africa. So the country has really transformed from the perspective of peace and reconciliation. a lot has been done. The Gachacha courts.
Sure.
Yes, a lot of reconciliation has been done within the communities. People are still now living with each other again peacefully. They have reconciled, and in my view, that was revolutionary in the way they handled the peace and reconciliation. But also from an economic perspective, the economy is growing tremendously. I think kudos to President Kagame, who I have seen so many memes or so many funny things on the internet. Some people suggesting he should become president of their country because of the transformation he has done. We are all aware Rwanda has a big marketing deal with the Yasso now, as well as PSG. Their tourism, I think, is also doing well, but also their MICE, which were, events, conferences.
Yes.
Yeah, they host large conferences at the Kigali International Conference Center. But that again is that it means that the local people are able to benefit from these things he has done deliberately. But they have also invested into infrastructure. I think they are completing the Mahoro Stadium, which is going to be, I think, one of the gems in the region.
Isn't it complete?
Yes, it is complete. But also the Kigali Arena, that has now become a cradle for international events, music events such as the Trace Awards, and again the Basketball League Africa Finals, still, which are happening this year in May. So there's a lot of progress that has been made, but I think still more is coming. Now we are going into the election.
Yeah. Sure.
Yes, is President Kagame coming?
Kagame is coming, and recently I was reading through and I happened to see where he was asking for his successor.
Yes.
I think that is after this election.
Yes.
Definitely, there is no question about him.
And I'm told some opposition political parties have endorsed him.
Yes, quite interesting that the events and the elections in Rwanda are always unique in their way, and this is what I think a question of democracy. Always there is a contestation of whether democracy and especially elections are the same everywhere, and then do they provide indeed what one would call as an electoral process that is free and fair.
That's true.
Now,
but again,
yes.
But again, we need also to avoid the risk of being pushed into a certain straitjacket. Democracies, I think, in my view, should be subjective. They have the unique way of doing it. But anyway, I'll leave you.
Definitely, I agree with you that we shouldn't be put in that box of where we think that democracy or feel that democracy has been imported. And this has been actually not just in an issue of in a country like Rwanda. Across Africa, it's been a debate that then democracy should be what we as the people determine and how we determine that. The question is, are the people empowered to determine how they want to be led, or they are being subjected to a way to determine that by their own?
Yes.
I think these are all issues that we can discuss, but you cannot refute the fact that out of this process, say in a process, an electoral process in a country like Rwanda,
yes,
there has been a success story to talk about.
A lot.
So when you talk about the developments you've referred to, people will look back and say, yes, we have held elections, and you can look around and state that there is improvement in this, there is improvement in service provision, development is at its peak. There is no doubt that, okay, how then do the people feel about this process? So for them, if that is what they feel that this has delivered, I think it makes much more sense, because every time we want to box ourselves into an electoral process from, say, democracy, from a certain outside context, then we can also go to a place and look at some of these Arab world where they're not electing leaders, but you see there is development, there is progress, service provision. So what is the parameter that we are going to say that this is a democratic state?
Yes.
Yet at the end of the day, it should be the services that the people are getting, probably once they get the services. So the very people that are probably pushing for a certain narrative on what democracy is do not push the same narrative in certain countries.
That's true.
So what does that mean? It's quite interesting, but for me also significant about these elections is the recent development of, say, technology into electoral processes. They speak a lot about electoral processes. the issues of AI as in the recent elections is
yes,
also something to become a debate that is happening.
So I would love to see how the Rwandese election panning, because there have been leaders in tech, in as far as technology is concerned, innovativeness, access to internet in Rwanda is actually quite democratized. It is actually cheap. But moving on, Joshua, let's move on to events in Kenya this week, where they lost their CDF, Francis Ogola. Francis Ogola is, I think, by his training, he's an Air Force pilot.
Yes.
And he comes from the Kenyan Air Force, having replaced General Kibicho, who was from the Kenyan Army.
Yes.
And it was the turn for the Air Force to provide a CDF. The politics of Kenya is, as you know, it is very, I would call it aggressive or insidious, but also it has some tribal and ethnic connotations to it. And when you listen to the president saying why he chose him as his CDF, there were not just considerations of his competence, which was very, very good and not in doubt, but also the fact that he came from the Nyanza region, which had never produced a CDF at that highest level. We lose him after, I think, 18 months in office. I think, yeah, more than 18, almost there. We lose him to a fatal plane crash, and it is sad. But what does his death mean, and what was his role in the stability of the region?
I think it's indeed a sorrowful morning or week for not just Kenya but also East Africa as a region, to have a CDF lose their life in a plane crash. It's not the first plane crash we have seen in the region. The question is, how have we gotten to the conclusion of some of these plane crashes that have happened?
Investigations.
Exactly.
Yes.
You remember the Garang crash?
Yes.
We never had a conclusive report on that.
But there was an investigation, a team of experts, although I think the findings have either never been made public or...
Absolutely. Yes. But these are the things that we're talking about. So for me, it feels that then when you specifically focus on him, it's quite interesting because his process of appointment is not just is not because he was the opportunity was for the Air Force to take on, but also the event that plays out at Bomas start to come into play.
Yes.
That's why you see there is a lot of debate about this, and the speech of the current President Ruto still refers to the Boma event.
Yes.
So it means it was very significant. I would have loved to know. Probably it's unfortunate it's gone, and for those who are still alive, the events that were really playing in the back door prior to the elections, the pressure he was managing to handle, and at what point probably does he succumb and want to do contrary as alleged by the current president?
Yes.
But
what is the role of the army in the context of the Kenyan politics? It seems for quite a long time since independence, the Kenyan army has been on the backdrop. They have managed to take away the army from the politics 100%. But the events at Bomas, as you say, in a way cast a light on his role there, as by then I think he was representing the army on the national. There's a committee that was, I think, the transition committee.
Yes.
The president thinks that committee had been sent to overturn his victory. But I've also seen reports that he was sent in to accompany the committee by the then CDF Kibochi, that there were some security issues, and when he reached, he sent him a message and said that apparently this was politics, not security. But anyway, we leave it at that, since but we condole with the family, but also the people of Kenya who have lost their CDF.